There comes a moment when striving gets exhausting, when praying starts to feel heavy, and when your soul quietly whispers, I can't carry this anymore. That's usually the moment God steps in, not with noise, not with urgency, but with a calm authority that settles your spirit. He doesn't rush you. He doesn't panic. He simply says, relax, I've got this. We live in a world that glorifies hustle, pressure, and constant motion. But God operates in rest, in timing, and in trust. What you're waiting for is not lost. What you're praying for is not delayed by accident. It's being prepared in a season where your faith is learning how to breathe again. This message is for the wary believer, the overthinker, the one who keeps asking when. God said, just relax. Everything will come to you, not because you forced it, but because you trusted Him enough to let go. There are seasons in life where it feels like nothing is happening, even though you've been praying, believing, showing up, and doing everything you know to do. Those are the moments when doubt tries to convince you that God has forgotten you, that your efforts are wasted, or that everyone else is moving forward while you're stuck in place. But stillness does not mean absence, and silence does not mean neglect. Trusting God when nothing seems to be moving requires a deeper kind of faith, the kind that doesn't rely on visible progress or immediate confirmation. It's the faith that stands firm when there are no signs, no updates, and no reassurance other than the quiet knowing that God is still working behind the scenes. We often assume that movement equals progress, but God does some of His most powerful work in unseen spaces. Roots grow underground before anything ever breaks the surface. Foundations are laid where no one applauds. When it feels like nothing is happening, God may actually be protecting you from moving too soon, from stepping into something you're not yet prepared to sustain. Waiting seasons are not wasted seasons. They are refining seasons. They shape your character, deepen your patience, and stretch your trust beyond what feels comfortable. The challenge is that human nature wants proof. We want signs, timelines, and guarantees. We want to know how and when everything will fall into place. But trust is built when answers are withheld, not when everything is explained. God often removes the details so that you'll hold on to Him instead. When you learn to trust Him without seeing results, you develop a faith that is not shaken by delays, disappointments, or detours. There's a reason God tells His people to be still. Stillness forces you to confront your fears, your control issues, and your tendency to rush ahead of divine timing. When nothing seems to be moving, it exposes whether you truly trust God or if you only trust Him when He moves at your pace. Trust means believing that even now, even here, even in this quiet place, God is arranging things in your favor. Sometimes the delay is not about the blessing, but about you. God may be strengthening your discernment, healing wounds you've ignored, or teaching you how to rest without guilt. If He gave you what you asked for too early, it might crush you instead of bless you. Trusting God means accepting that He knows the full picture while you only see a small part. In seasons where nothing seems to be moving, comparison becomes dangerous. You start measuring your life against someone else's progress, forgetting that their journey is not your assignment. God custom designs each path, and what looks like delay in your life may be precision. What looks like stagnation may actually be alignment. Trust grows when you stop looking sideways and start looking upward. Faith is not proven in moments of abundance, but in moments of waiting. It's easy to praise God when doors are opening, but trusting Him when doors remain closed requires surrender. It means waking up every day and choosing peace over panic, prayer over pressure, and hope over frustration. It means believing that God is not late, not confused, and not careless with your future. When God says, relax, He is not dismissing your pain or minimizing your desire. He is inviting you into rest, into confidence, into assurance that everything is unfolding according to His plan. Trusting God when nothing seems to be moving is an act of courage. It's declaring that even without evidence, you believe He is faithful, that even without movement, you believe He is working, that everything meant for you will arrive at the right time, in the right way, without you forcing it. Rest is often misunderstood because the world equates value with exhaustion and productivity with worth. From an early age, we are taught that if we are not constantly doing, striving, pushing, and proving, then we are falling behind. That mindset slowly trains the heart to feel guilty for slowing down and anxious when things are quiet. But rest in God's economy is not a reward for finishing everything. It is a command that comes from trust. Rest is obedience because it declares that you believe God can handle what you cannot, that He can work even when your hands are still. True rest requires faith because it goes against survival instincts. When bills are due, dreams feel delayed, prayers seem unanswered, and responsibilities pile up. Rest feels irresponsible. Yet God repeatedly invites His people to lie down, to be still, to cease striving. Not because the work is unimportant, but because worrying never produces what obedience can. Rest says, I've done what I can, and now I will trust God to do what only He can. That posture is not weakness, it is spiritual maturity. Rest exposes how much control we think we need. Many people stay busy not because they are productive, but because stillness makes them uncomfortable. Silence brings thoughts they've avoided, fears they've suppressed, and questions they don't want to answer. But rest forces you to confront the truth that you are not the source. You are not the provider. You are not the savior of your own life. Obedient rest shifts the burden back to God where it belongs. There is a difference between rest and quitting. Rest does not mean giving up on your calling, your goals, or your prayers. It means trusting the timing of God more than the urgency of your emotions. It means understanding that overworking can actually be a form of unbelief, a subtle way of saying you don't trust God to come through unless you exhaust yourself first. Rest declares that God is faithful even when you stop pushing. When God established rest, He wasn't concerned about productivity. He was protecting relationship. Rest creates space to hear His voice, to realign your heart, and to remember who you are apart from what you do. Without rest, faith becomes mechanical and prayer becomes transactional. You start serving God from pressure instead of love. Obedient rest restores intimacy because it allows you to sit with God without asking Him for anything. Many breakthroughs are delayed not because God is unwilling, but because exhaustion clouds discernment. When you are constantly tired, you make rushed decisions, react emotionally, and mistake urgency for instruction. Rest sharpens spiritual sensitivity. It helps you distinguish between doors God opened and doors you forced. Sometimes God calls you to rest so you don't sabotage what He's preparing. Rest also teaches patience, which is essential for sustaining blessings. If you cannot rest while waiting, you may not be able to rest once the blessing arrives. Obedience and rest trains your heart to trust God at every stage, not just at the finish line. It teaches you to live from peace instead of pressure, from assurance instead of anxiety. There is humility in rest. It admits that your strength has limits and that God's does not. It acknowledges that you are human, dependent, and in need of grace. Rest honors God because it reflects confidence in His sovereignty. It says that even if you don't see immediate results, you believe He is still working. When God calls you to rest, He is not asking you to stop believing. He is asking you to stop striving. He is reminding you that obedience is not always loud, active, or visible. Sometimes obedience looks like waiting without complaining, trusting without evidence, and resting without fear. In those quiet moments, God often does His deepest work, rearranging your heart, strengthening your faith, and aligning everything so that when the time comes, what He brings into your life can be received with peace instead of panic. Letting go of control is one of the hardest spiritual disciplines because control often feels like safety. When life becomes uncertain, holding tightly to plans, timelines, and expectations feels like the only way to protect yourself from disappointment. But control can quietly turn into a barrier that blocks God's movement. Releasing control so God can work is not about passivity, it is about trust. It is choosing to believe that God's wisdom is greater than your understanding and that His ways are higher than your strategies. Control usually comes from fear, not faith. Fear of being hurt again, fear of missing out, fear of failing, fear of waiting too long. So you manage, you overthink, you micromanage outcomes, and you rehearse worst-case scenarios in your mind. But the more you try to control everything, the heavier your spirit becomes. God never intended for you to carry the full weight of your future. Releasing control is an act of surrender that says, I don't need to know how this will work out to believe that you are in it. Many people pray for God to move, but still hold the steering wheel tightly. They ask for guidance, but resist redirection. They ask for peace, but refuse to release the very thing stealing it. God will not force his will over your clenched fists. Sometimes the delay is not because God is withholding, but because you are gripping too tightly. Release creates room for God to step in and do what only he can do. When you release control, you begin to understand that obedience does not always come with clarity. God often asks for surrender before he gives explanation. He may tell you to wait without telling you how long, to move without showing you the full map, or to let go without revealing what comes next. That kind of faith is uncomfortable because it removes predictability, but it strengthens dependence. God is not looking for perfection. He is looking for trust. Control gives the illusion of power, but surrender gives access to peace. When you stop trying to manage every detail, you free your mind from constant pressure. You stop replaying conversations, anticipating outcomes, and stressing over things you cannot change. Releasing control allows you to live in the present instead of being consumed by the future. It teaches you that God works best when you are willing to follow instead of dictate. There are moments when God intentionally disrupts your plans to show you where your trust really is. Plans fall apart, doors close unexpectedly, and timelines shift. These moments are not punishments, they are invitations. Invitations to trust God beyond your logic. Invitations to let him lead instead of asking him to bless what you already decided. Releasing control in these moments prevents bitterness and keeps your heart soft. Surrender also reveals identity. When control is released, you realize that your worth is not tied to outcomes. You are valuable even when things are unresolved. You are loved even when answers are delayed. God's approval is not dependent on how well you manage your life. Releasing control reminds you that you are a child, not a manager of the universe. Letting go does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop obsessing. It means you pray, prepare, and then trust God with the results. You do your part and leave the rest in his hands. That balance is where faith matures. It's where anxiety loses its grip and confidence in God's character grows. When you release control, God often works in ways you never expected. He opens doors you didn't knock on, brings help you didn't ask for, and aligns things you couldn't have planned. His solutions are not limited by your imagination. Control limits outcomes to what you can see. Surrender allows God to exceed it. Releasing control also teaches patience. You learn that rushing ahead can cost you peace, while waiting can protect your purpose. You begin to trust that delays are not denials and that God's timing is not careless. In surrender, you stop fighting the process and start trusting it. When God says relax, he is inviting you to loosen your grip, to unclench your heart, and to stop carrying burdens that were never yours to bear. Releasing control so God can work is not losing control. It is placing it in the hands of someone who has never failed, who sees what you cannot see, and who is always working for your good even when you don't feel it. Human urgency is loud. It pressures, rushes, and convinces you that if something doesn't happen now, it may never happen at all. Urgency thrives on fear and impatience, making you feel like time is running out and that you are falling behind. But divine timing operates from a completely different place. It is calm, intentional, and precise. Understanding divine timing over human urgency requires learning how to quiet the noise of panic and trust the pace of God. Human urgency is driven by comparison. You look at others and assume their timeline should be yours. You measure your progress by someone else's milestones and forget that God never called you to live by another person's clock. Divine timing is personal. It considers your capacity, your healing, your readiness, and the alignment of every detail surrounding your life. What feels late to you may be perfectly on time in God's plan. Urgency often pushes you to make decisions before you have discernment. It convinces you to settle, to compromise, or to force doors open because waiting feels unbearable. Divine timing, on the other hand, protects you. It closes doors you would have rushed through and delays outcomes that would have overwhelmed you. God's timing is not about withholding, it is about preparation. He is not just concerned with getting you there, but with keeping you there once you arrive. One of the hardest lessons is accepting that delay does not mean denial. Many blessings arrive later than expected because they require maturity to sustain them. Without growth, the very thing you prayed for could become a burden instead of a blessing. Divine timing allows your character to catch up with your calling. It strengthens patience, builds wisdom, and deepens faith in ways that instant results never could. Human urgency demands answers, but divine timing invites trust. God rarely explains the full process up front. He asks you to walk by faith, not by sight. That means trusting Him even when the path is unclear and the waiting feels uncomfortable. Faith grows when you choose obedience without guarantees. Every moment of waiting becomes an opportunity to trust God more deeply. There are seasons when God seems slow, but He is never late. He sees connections you cannot see, conversations you are not part of, and obstacles you are unaware of. He aligns people, circumstances, and timing with precision. What feels like a pause is often divine alignment taking place behind the scenes. If God rushed what He was building, it would collapse under pressure. Understanding divine timing also requires surrendering your idea of control. You may have planned your life down to the smallest detail, but God often rearranges those plans to lead you somewhere better. His interruptions are not mistakes, they are redirections. When you trust divine timing, you stop resisting change and start embracing it as part of God's purpose. Waiting teaches you to listen. In urgency, you speak more than you hear. In waiting, your spirit becomes attentive. You begin to recognize God's voice, His nudges, and His warnings. Divine timing sharpens spiritual awareness, helping you move when God says move and stay when He says stay. That sensitivity protects you from unnecessary detours. Human urgency focuses on speed, but divine timing focuses on fruit. God is more concerned with lasting impact than quick results. What He builds slowly often lasts longer and carries greater purpose. When you understand this, waiting no longer feels like punishment. It feels like investment. Divine timing also builds resilience. It teaches you how to trust God through uncertainty and how to remain faithful when progress is invisible. You learn to praise God in the waiting, not just in the breakthrough. That kind of faith transforms you from the inside out. When God says relax, He is reminding you that time is in His hands. You don't have to rush what He has already scheduled. Understanding divine timing over human urgency allows you to breathe, to trust, and to rest in the confidence that what is meant for you will arrive exactly when it should. Not a moment too early and not a moment too late. Peace is often misunderstood as the absence of problems. But true peace is the presence of trust even when problems remain. Life does not suddenly become quiet when you are aligned with God. Challenges still exist. Responsibilities still demand attention, and uncertainty still shows up. The difference is internal. Peace becomes a steady anchor in the middle of chaos, a calm that does not depend on circumstances changing. Peace is one of the clearest signs that your life is aligned with God. When you are out of alignment, anxiety speaks loudly. Your thoughts race, your heart feels restless, and nothing ever feels settled. Even good opportunities bring stress instead of excitement. But when alignment is present, peace follows. That does not mean everything makes sense. It means your spirit recognizes that you are where you are supposed to be. Peace is God's confirmation when clarity is missing. Many people ignore peace because it feels too simple. They expect alignment to come with dramatic signs or instant results. But God often leads through peace, not pressure. Pressure pushes you to hurry, to prove, to perform. Peace invites you to trust, to wait, and to rest. When a decision draws you closer to peace, it is often a sign that God is guiding you in that direction. Peace also acts as a warning system. When something looks right on the surface but disturbs your spirit, that lack of peace is not random. It is protection. God may be shielding you from an outcome you cannot yet see. Alignment does not always lead to comfort, but it leads to inner assurance. Even difficult assignments can carry peace when they come from God. There is a difference between comfort and peace. Comfort avoids disruption. Peace can exist within it. God may call you into unfamiliar territory, but if it is aligned with His will, peace will accompany the journey. Fear may still appear, but it will not control you. Peace gives you the courage to move forward even when the path is uncertain. Peace grows when you stop fighting what God is doing. Resistance creates inner turmoil. Acceptance creates rest. When you align your expectations with God's plan, you release the need to control outcomes. That surrender allows peace to settle in your heart. It reminds you that you are not responsible for everything, only for obedience. Distractions often steal peace. Noise, comparison, and constant urgency pull your focus away from God. Alignment requires intentional quiet. When you make space for prayer, reflection, and stillness, peace becomes clearer. You begin to recognize when something is from God because it draws you closer to peace rather than away from it. Peace does not mean you will never feel anxious, but it means anxiety no longer defines you. It becomes a signal, not a master. When anxiety rises, peace invites you back into alignment, back into trust, back into rest. It reminds you that God is present even when emotions fluctuate. Aligned peace also brings confidence. You stop second-guessing every decision and replaying every conversation. You trust that God is directing your steps even when you don't have all the answers. That confidence is quiet but powerful. It allows you to move forward without constantly seeking validation. Peace is sustained by relationship. The more you walk with God, the more natural peace becomes. It is not forced, it flows. You begin to recognize that peace is not something you chase, but something you receive when your heart is aligned with God's will. When God says relax, peace is often the first thing He restores. It settles your spirit, calms your thoughts, and reassures your heart. Peace as a sign of alignment reminds you that even in uncertainty, you are not lost, not late, and not alone. You are exactly where God can reach you and guide you forward. Anxiety thrives where trust is weak, and it grows louder when the future feels uncertain. It fills the mind with questions that have no answers and scenarios that have not happened. Faith, however, speaks from a different place. Faith does not deny reality, but it refuses to let fear be the final voice. Letting faith replace anxiety is not an instant switch. It is a daily decision to trust God more than your thoughts. Anxiety often comes from trying to predict outcomes. You replay conversations, imagine worst-case scenarios, and carry tomorrow's burdens today. This constant mental activity drains peace and creates emotional exhaustion. Faith invites you back into the present. It reminds you that God is already in your tomorrow and that you do not need to solve what has not yet arrived. Replacing anxiety with faith begins by acknowledging your limits. Anxiety convinces you that you must have everything figured out or something will go wrong. Faith says that God is the one who sustains, provides, and protects. When you accept that you are not in control of everything, anxiety loses its grip. Faith grows strongest where surrender begins. Anxiety focuses on what could go wrong, but faith focuses on who God is. It shifts attention from problems to promises. When fear rises, faith responds by remembering past victories, answered prayers, and moments where God made a way when there was no visible path. Memory becomes a weapon against worry, reminding you that God has been faithful before and will be faithful again. Silence is important in this process. Anxiety loves noise and constant input. Faith grows in stillness. When you create space to pray, to breathe, and to sit quietly with God, anxious thoughts begin to slow. In those moments, faith is strengthened not by information, but by presence. God's peace settles in ways that logic cannot explain. Letting faith replace anxiety also requires guarding your thoughts. Not every thought deserves your attention. Anxiety produces thoughts that feel urgent but are often untrue. Faith challenges those thoughts and brings them into alignment with truth. Instead of asking, what if everything goes wrong? Faith asks, what if God comes through again? That shift changes everything. Faith does not remove responsibility. It removes panic. You still plan, prepare, and make wise choices, but you do so from peace instead of fear. Anxiety rushes decisions. Faith waits for direction. When you move by faith, your steps are steadier and your heart remains grounded even in uncertainty. There will be moments when anxiety returns, and that does not mean your faith has failed. It means you are human. Faith is built through repetition, through choosing trust again and again. Each time you hand your worries back to God, your faith grows stronger and anxiety grows weaker. Community also plays a role. Anxiety isolates, but faith connects. When you share your fears with trusted people, you break anxiety's power. Faith is often strengthened through encouragement, prayer, and shared belief. God uses others to remind you of truth when your mind feels overwhelmed. Letting faith replace anxiety is a journey, not a destination. It is learning to rest in God's care even when life feels uncertain. When God says relax, He is inviting you to trust Him with what you cannot control. Faith becomes the place where your mind finds rest, your heart finds assurance, and your soul learns that it does not have to carry fear alone. When God speaks rest into your life, it is often after a long season of carrying burdens you were never meant to hold alone. Many people don't realize how heavy their soul has become because they have normalized stress, pressure, and emotional overload. You wake up tired, go to bed tired, and still feel like you haven't done enough. God's invitation to relax is not permission to disengage from life. It is an invitation to lay down unnecessary weight so your spirit can breathe again. Carrying burdens can become an identity. You become the strong one, the dependable one, the fixer, the one who never breaks. Over time, strength turns into strain. You begin to believe that if you stop holding everything together, everything will fall apart. But God never asked you to be the foundation. He is the foundation. When you carry what belongs to Him, it slowly drains your joy, your peace, and your ability to trust. God's rest confronts the lie that your value is tied to how much you carry. You are not more worthy because you are exhausted. You are not more faithful because you are overwhelmed. God's love for you is not earned through overextension. When He tells you to relax, He is reminding you that you are His child, not His employee. Rest restores identity before it restores strength. Many burdens are emotional rather than physical. Regret, guilt, unforgiveness, fear, and disappointment weigh heavily on the heart. You replay past mistakes, worry about future outcomes, and silently carry pain no one sees. God's rest invites you to release those internal weights, not by pretending they don't exist, but by trusting Him with what you cannot fix. Healing often begins when you stop rehearsing pain and start surrendering it. Rest also requires honesty. You cannot lay down burdens you refuse to acknowledge. God invites you to come as you are, not as you perform. When you admit you are tired, unsure, or overwhelmed, you create space for grace. God meets you in truth, not pretense. Rest flows where honesty lives. Some burdens come from expectations placed on you by others. You try to live up to roles, labels, and responsibilities that God never assigned. Over time, those expectations create pressure that steals peace. God's rest realigns you with His voice over every other voice. When you listen to Him, you gain clarity about what to carry and what to release. Rest teaches discernment. You begin to recognize the difference between responsibility and obsession, between care and control. Not everything requires your intervention. Not every problem is yours to solve. God's rest gives you permission to step back and trust that He is working even when you are not actively doing something. Laying down burdens does not happen all at once. It happens moment by moment. Each time anxiety rises, you choose trust. Each time fear speaks, you choose faith. Each time pressure builds, you choose rest. These small decisions reshape your inner world. Over time, peace becomes your default instead of stress. God's rest is not fragile. It can exist in busy seasons, uncertain seasons, and waiting seasons. It anchors you when life feels unstable. When you rest in God, you stop reacting emotionally and start responding spiritually. Your decisions become calmer. Your perspective becomes clearer. Your heart becomes lighter. When God says relax, He is not ignoring your responsibilities. He is reminding you that you are not alone in them. He is asking you to release what is crushing you so He can carry it with you. Rest becomes the place where strength is renewed, faith is restored, and your soul remembers that it was never meant to survive on pressure alone.